Hey folks, welcome to the final session of Bring Your Own Bold 2023. Before we get into this one, I just want to say a huge and heartfelt thanks to everybody who's tuned in today and yesterday. Whether it's for one session, for a few of them, or for all of them, I really do hope you've enjoyed them as much as I have, and that you've taken away as many as possible of the wonderful insights that our amazing guest speakers have provided for us both yesterday and today. I also just want to say a quick but equally massive heartfelt thanks to everyone on our team here at ShapeBuy, who's pulled together to deliver BYOB not just over these 2 days, but the last few months. We did most of it in-house, and you guys are absolutely brilliant. Alex, Nick, Wei, Tom, Tandy, Jess, the list goes on, but you guys know who you are and you absolutely smashed it, so thanks so much. Also, just want to say a quick big thanks to our sponsors and event partners, Big Marker, for all your help over the weeks and months preceding the event, and also behind the scenes over the last 2 days. Really much appreciated. Thanks, guys. So yeah, let's get the last session on. And I'm so thrilled that this is how we're closing out the event. Because number one, it really cuts right to the heart of what this event is all about, which is finding your brand's true bold and expressing that. And number two, here at ShapeBuy, we love Figma. We love the product, we love the brand, and we love their awesome event config. But fanboying aside, Figma's always broken new ground from a product perspective, but equally impressive is the way its brand has matched that commitment to innovation by constantly redefining what a B2B brand should look and feel like. And I'm so happy today to be joined by Damien Correll, Figma's creative director, to explore how he and his team approach the challenge of consistently pushing boundaries and defying expectations, and also why doing that is becoming increasingly important across the B2B world. So Damien, welcome. How are you doing?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing well.
Good. I'm so glad to have you with us. Let's get straight into it. So, as I said, the Figma product is pretty exceptional, to say the least. But to your mind, why is it so important that the brand is loved by its audience as much as the product is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of boils down to brand being bigger than just the way we visually or even verbally express it in the market. It's, I think people have an attachment to the product in pretty significant ways. They're in there like 8 hours a day, right? And I think they are often just impressed by the velocity of the ways in which we ship features, and I think like the brand itself, the visual brand, the verbal brand, kind of has to kind of meet that moment as well. I mean, I think the product itself just innovates so quickly, has been an innovator since the very beginning. So I think we're kind of always trying to go toe to toe with our product counterparts and making sure that we're really showing up in exceptional ways as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think so. It's kind of like almost like a battle in a way, or a friendly kind of rivalry between you guys and product to see who can innovate the most. Is that kind of how it works?
I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe that's my just like internalizing it a little bit, but I do feel.
You've said it now. They know it now.
I did. It's out there. Yeah, but I think there is like there isn't always an opportunity for the brand to show up and kind of challenge the status quo, just as the product does or has done historically. So we kind of fly that banner as well. We really want to kind of show up and impress and surprise folks.
Yeah, and just one thing I was thinking of just there. So it talked about a little bit about the audience. Your audience is kind of primarily made up of developers, designers, creatives. Does it help from a brand point of view that that audience is probably a little bit more in tune with a creatively minded brand, or does it actually maybe add a bit of pressure because they maybe have a slightly higher bar that they expect a bit more from brands in general and from you as a brand?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways. I think in some ways we have a lot of leverage to be able to kind of push the expressions just a little bit, just because of the design fluency of our audience. But I also think the things that we put out into the world are, for better or worse, sort of scrutinized by designers. And so I think we do have to, we have to surprise them. We do have to kind of meet their expectations, and we have to exceed those expectations. So designing for designers can be a bit of can be a challenge in and of itself, but it's a healthy one. And I think on the brand studio team, at least, it really makes us sort of second and triple guess some of the moves that we're making. And it also just like allows us to kind of create some space where we are we're experimenting out in the open, or we're being a little bit more we're trying to be a little bit more expressive with the brand, because we know that our audience will really appreciate that.
For sure, yeah. And you've been at Figma for 2 years now. Was that was that boundary pushing attitude, was that already there when you joined, or is it something that you've driven during your time there?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the heart of Figma, there is this instinct to challenge the status quo. So the brand team before I got here, I thought, you know, the brand foundations that I inherited when I joined the team are really strong and really impressive. And I think I have been here to kind of find the edges of that and to really explore that, and allow the growing team to continue to develop that. But I really do think, you know, I think that's like at the heart of what we do at Figma, both on the product side and the brand side, is really just kind of pushing those boundaries, or really challenging the expectations.
Absolutely, yeah. And in terms of, again, coming back to a similar point to, I suppose, the one I made a little bit earlier, so that attitude's always been there. How much of a challenge is it to keep raising that bar higher and higher? Is it a challenge, or are your muscle skills so honed that it almost comes naturally?
I mean, you know, it's always, yeah, it's always a challenge. I think we're always kind of up for the challenge, though, which I think is the important thing here. We want to push ourselves, and as like a kind of craft focused leader myself, like I'm always excited to kind of push us beyond what we maybe have done in the past. I think there's like, it's healthy to kind of look at benchmarks and look at like what we've done and what was successful, for sure. But you know, we never want to go and do a sort of rinse and repeat of something that we've done in the past. And that's my own personal motivation, but the team itself, I think, are motivated by trying something new and different. And I think even when we talk about things that we do fairly regularly or routinely, like an annual program, you know, it's perhaps the same challenge that we did in 2022, but now we're doing in 2023. But how do we reinvent that, or how do we kind of rethink that, or reapproach it?
Absolutely, yeah. And next thing I want to come on to is something that you and I spoke about quite a bit when we first started having this conversation about taking part in BYOB. And it could be construed maybe as slightly controversial, depending on how you look at it. But, you know, we spoke about how it's really, really important to you that Figma doesn't look and feel like a typical B2B brand. I mean, first of all, do you think that there is such a thing as a typical B2B brand? And are we maybe being a bit disparaging that typical B2B brands aren't necessarily creatively brave?
Yeah. So, I mean, I first want to acknowledge and respect that there are patterns that exist, and those patterns exist for a variety of reasons. For, you know, familiarity on the consumer side, trust, for example. Like I think of the sort of B2B trend of what I like to call, and lovingly call it this, but like Apple Keynote core, which is everything that kind of, you know, looks like it maybe exists on the Apple website, or kind of like derivative of what might exist in a kind of Apple Keynote. And there's like a level of trust there that is like baked into that. It sort of signifies a number of different things. So I don't want to like, you know, I don't think that's Figma's place to kind of exist in, and that's like not our world to kind of live in. And for us, I think it's like finding the gaps in what exists out there from a brand perspective, and how we can kind of inhabit it and we can kind of live in it. It's also, you know, I think and I'm not going to take credit for this, because when I joined in 2021, there already had been a brand refresh that sort of felt more like a B2C than a B2B. It had sort of an attitude and playfulness that was probably more akin to a consumer brand than a B2B brand. But I think that sort of set the foundation of, how do we kind of continue to develop that? How do we talk to our customer, which we call our community? It's like, how do we talk to our community? And then sort of makes it, I think, easier for us to speak authentically through a kind of like more consumer-esque lens.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's as simple as that? Because we have these conversations time and time again here in the studio and with our peers as well, which is kind of like, first of all, it's this kind of notion that B2B brands have a certain, ethos, a certain kind of, not necessarily look and feel, but a certain way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And then the follow on from that conversation is that, we need to be much more B2C like, kind of putting forward the notion that B2C is more advanced creatively than B2B. But actually, to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't know, you probably will agree though, to be fair, it feels like brands like Figma don't necessarily think in those terms all the time. They think, what's the right thing for us as a brand, not necessarily whether it fits more B2B and B2C.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a post-rationalization when I think about the difference between, or how Figma kind of shows up as more of a B2C. It's me just kind of like looking at the market, or looking at what we do that I think is maybe like unique to us, and how it might apply to other brands that might be just like trying to achieve more of an emotional connection than like a functional or value-based connection. So yeah, it's not a conscious effort. We're not saying like, okay, this is what a B2B would do. What would a B2C do? We're not going down that path. I think it's important for us to just be kind of rooted in what is authentic to Figma, and it is often just the way we're expressing it, or maybe not like they don't fit in like a typical kind of like B2B pattern.
Yeah. I suppose the point I'm making, I guess, is that I think, and it's kind of, it's in the title of this talk, I suppose, there are still certain expectations of a B2B brand, but actually, mm-hmm. I think the very fact that you as a B2B brand are kind of taking things into new territories really speaks to the fact that maybe expectations of a B2B brand aren't what they were even a few years ago. And actually, I kind of want to move the conversation towards, exactly how you're defying expectations in a particular way, because, so we had Aaron Poe, the head of Zappia's brand studio, on for our last session mm-hmm. yesterday. I'm really disappointed we didn't get to finish due to some technical issues. And folks, we will do a pre-record and get that to you guys, I promise. But we were chatting before the event, and Aaron was telling me how he was a live attendee at Config, your annual event, Config 23. He was telling me how the identity and the overall brand experience was kind of immaculate, like he was in complete awe. So I'd love you to tell me a little bit about Config and why you guys choose to consistently push the envelope on that kind of traditional B2B event experience to really, to ultimately to deliver the unexpected.
Well, first off, it's very sweet of Aaron to say, because I think is a supremely talented person, and I love what he's doing over at Zappia. For Config, I mean, this year was interesting, actually, because it was our first in-person event, and I have now been a part of quite a few design conferences in general. I used to be a creative director at Google, and we had a design conference called SPAN for a number of years. But my first Config was 2022's, and that was a 24-hour affair. Like that was we did this 24 hours of Config, but it was all virtual, all just streamed on the web, and it was hard to kind of like gauge the reaction of how people felt about the branding, about the actual experience of it all, positive or negative. Like it was like there were a few signals that we got maybe on social, but I think because of the way it was consumed, we only got so much insight into that. We heard a lot about the content, a lot about all of the other things that go into Config, but not so much about the branding. This past year, it being our first foray back to an in-person event since the first Config back in 2020, it was really awesome for the team to be able to take the visual identity that we were developing and start to apply it to a physical space, start to think about motion in the space. What does the opener film look like? What are the swag items? And really kind of building out this like doing some world building essentially for an event. And you know, as we were going through the process, we have an amazing events team who really allows us to take some chances as a brand studio. I think we're constantly trying to push and see what we can get away with, and more often than not, we're getting away with quite a bit. But you know, back to the like, we have to kind of challenge ourselves in a lot of ways. Like, I think it's like on us. Like, as a studio team, we could deliver a fairly like buttoned up, polished conference package, and I'm sure it would be fine, and I'm sure it would be a really like effective conference. You know, we sort of see this as like a really healthy and fun challenge to kind of to find the edges of the Figma brand. You know, we know we're not going to live within the core Figma brand. We know it's a conference where we're able to kind of experiment and explore. So we're going to do that. But we really want to keep the sensibility of the brand in mind. So for us, it's just like, how far can we stretch that? How interesting can we make it for ourselves? And often that that pays off. I think we got a ton of great responses from attendees about the overall event, and then we were also super proud to hear how the identity itself really resonated with people.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. It really did. You know, our team here attended the virtual side of things, and just blown away. And I suppose what I'm quite curious about is you mentioned there that you kind of almost saw it as a challenge to kind of create something that would be interesting to yourselves as a team. But ultimately, what's the big aim for this? What's the reason for going kind of unconventional, unexpected? Is it to give attendees the most incredible experience? Is it to because ultimately, there's a slight risk here, maybe, that if you're putting the focus on the brand, you're taking the focus away from the announcements and the product there, maybe.
Yeah.
So what's the ultimate goal? What are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives, and what's the reason for doing what you're doing in order to achieve those objectives?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good call out. I think we are always conscious of what we're shipping and the content that's coming through on the main stage. We're always riding this tension between being true and authentic to the brand and keep in mind the sort of project goals, as well as surprising and showing up in a slightly new or different way to our target audience, or in this case, like the attendees. So I think we like to keep a good balance between those things. We kind of like the push and pull of all of that. And I think, like, in general, we want to make sure that we're, the things that we're making are in service of that core objective of making, bringing everyone. This year particularly was like bringing everyone together. It was really like about connections, about designers and developers connecting as well. And then also some of the new feature and product launches that we had to really amp those up and sort of champion those as well. So I think, looking at all of those things, it's constantly in our mind as far as where to push and pull, and where to maybe recede a little bit, and where to kind of go and be a little bit more prouder or confident with the brand expression. I think in general, though, I guess with all branding, this is relevant, but within the event branding space, you can't do all the moves all the time, right? You have to have some sort of push and pull. You have to kind of dial it up and dial it down. And I think we do think about that from the early days of when we're designing the visual ID, like what's the mild to wild that we have here? Like, when can we go really big and bold, and when do we just sort of need to sit back, allow the content to be the content, and allow everyone to be engaged. So
yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I'm really, really curious about is, because you're right, event branding and kind of experiential activation, as it were, does require different thinking to maybe a lot of the work that you guys as a studio tend to do these days, which is obviously much more digitally focused. From a kind of team makeup point of view, and a kind of getting, if I can swear on this, which I can because it's my event, getting shit done. what's the team makeup there, and what's the key to the success really of that collaboration to make it all happen? And you mentioned the events team as well, which is obviously really important to that.
Yeah, so we are a brand studio, like most kind of internal creative agencies. We're a mixture of folks, but mostly brand designers are on the team. But we work cross-functionally all the time. Like, we rarely work on a project from start to finish within the studio. There are a number of different resources and things like that we'll create, but those are usually born out of this idea or need or thing that we're hearing and seeing from our cross-functional partners. So yeah, we're about I think we're 18 people today. We are working on a range of things constantly. So anything from ads to obviously activations, and all the way down to like toolkits and like other things that kind of enable others. I think we're actually in a pretty unique position at Figma where, for better or worse, everyone at the company knows how to use Figma. So we're able to provide them with resources and other things where they can, instead of asking us for some of the smaller sort of smaller kind of brand pieces, or if something's going out the door that needs some kind of brand attention, there's probably a template or probably something else that they can borrow and use. So, but yeah, we kind of work in a sort of typical kind of like internal agency capacity.
Yeah, nice. I'm a bit conscious of time here.
Yeah.
I said it on the last session as well. These ones really fly through. There is one question, but we've got a few questions coming in on the chat.
Oh, okay.
I want to get to those. There's some really interesting ones there. But the last question I had for you from me was really kind of just bringing it back to that wider point about kind of B2B brands, and really kind of pushing beyond kind of convention. I mean, in your view, is that need for brands to push beyond expectations, is that kind of universal these days? Do you think every brand really needs to be doing that to stand out in this kind of crowdy, noisy world that we live in? Or actually, would you say that maybe it comes down to the needs and kind of expectations of the individual business and their audience?
Yeah, I'd say the noise of it all, the fact that there's so much out there that it seems on paper that, we have to continue to kind of go beyond expectations. But I just want to like maybe unpack those words just a little bit. I think the most important thing for any brand is to be truly authentic. So yes, I think you should exceed expectations, or yes, you should kind of go past what maybe your intended audience is sort of expecting of you. But I think you have to do it in a way that is like genuinely and truly authentic to your brand, to your company, to your product. That's something that we will constantly do, and we will constantly kind of vet against, like, okay, yes, we could push it this far, but is this something Figma would do? So I don't think it's I think everyone should just be mindful of what it is you do and what it is you do well, and how you can do that even better, I guess, is maybe the push there. But make sure that you're kind of calibrating to what is maybe what makes sense, I guess, for you to do. If it is going a bit above those expectations, or is it more about not rinsing and repeating and doing a thing that you've done in the past and kind of pushing that? I think that's totally valid. But I think doing something extreme or doing something that like doesn't feel like you is not it, even if you do get the attention.
And that's really uncanny, because that was kind of the nub of the very first conversation we had in the very first panel session yesterday. So we've come which is
full circle. Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, Damien, thanks so much. We've got about 5 minutes or so for some
questions. Yeah.
Had a few of them come through. What was your favorite config? Is the first one.
What was my favorite config?
Did you go to configs before you were at Figma?
Well, I didn't go to the first one. I did attend every other virtually. So the first one, just for context too, it happened in February of 2020. So it was kind of like just under the wire there. But I mean, I have to say this past one was just such a delight, I think, for a number of reasons. It felt like this kind of reunion of sorts too. I think gathering um, gathering a big chunk of the design community together just felt, really good and really special.
Nice, awesome. And I really like this question actually that's just come through. Can you share a specific challenge or failure that you've encountered in Figma's branding journey and the lessons learned from overcoming it? Always love that.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'd say when we were growing the team, I think there was a lot of being a little bit more reactionary work that had to get done. I think there was just like we were probably severely understaffed. I think we tried to do as much in-house as possible. And we also tried to kind of enable others. And I think there were a few things that we kind of let slide just due to time constraints and things like that. I can't think of like one specific example, but I do remember there was a moment where, there were things going out the door that I was like, should that go out the door? I don't know. But also the risk of like blocking that project felt maybe too risky. So yeah, I think sometimes if it's going to be low brand impact and it's going out the door and it's a little off brand, I think sometimes you have to kind of take a deep breath and say it'll be okay, and really try to affect and spend the time, especially when you're under resourced, to like focus on the things that are going to have a ton of impact or are going to be genuinely important for brand and brand perception.
For sure. Another good question. Does the want to push yourself as far as you can go at Figma start right at the top? Actually, these are two questions, sorry. Does it start right at the top? So is that kind of driven from the founders? And also, do you think that's important in attracting the right creative talent?
Yeah. So I'll say without a doubt, Dylan, our CEO, he pushes me, he challenges me. I embrace it. Like I love the push. And I think that's healthy for me at least, to be able to kind of, make sure that I'm not only just like delivering at a high bar, but I'm really kind of thinking through this, and I'm really kind of making sure that whatever I'm putting forth is like something I'm completely convicted in, and I also believe that it's like completely ownable and distinct, and all of those things. So there's always a push there. And then yeah, I think like as we built the team, that is something that we maybe that we look for. I mean, we really look for folks that are high talent and ego free. I think those are like, the two like magical ingredients. But I think in general, folks are on the team are very excited to be able to kind of see their own personal development and the creative work that they're working on to be challenged. There's always a time and place. Obviously, things need to ship, things need to go out the door, and we can't just be spinning and spinning and spinning. But yeah, I think it's like it's a pretty fundamental part of being on the studio and being here at Figma as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you've got designers queuing at the door to join your team. I'm sure you get applications on a regular basis, right?
We do. I mean, and we have a great recruiting team that they probably have to deal with way more of those inbound requests than I get to see. But yeah, designers love Figma, and of course they want to work on the brand. So I don't blame them. That's why I'm here.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah, I think we just about got time for one more question. Yeah, there's a few. Hang on, I'm going to try and pick the best one. Okay, let's go with this one. How do you encourage a culture of creativity and innovation within your team? And what practices have you found effective in consistently pushing beyond expectations? I think the first part of that question is probably really relevant, actually. I think we might have possibly covered the second part. But how do you encourage a culture of creativity and innovation within your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things that go into that. I always encourage. We have this saying. It's actually like there's like a David Lynch interview where I think it's like when they were doing the recent Twin Peaks season 3, and he was complaining about they don't have time to get dreamy. So we have this kind of push all the time. We're in the beginning of our project to really go dreamy, to make sure that we are not we're considering the constraints of a project, but we're not like weighing them against the possibilities of where we could go or what we could do. So really early days, really encourage the team to really, I don't know, push on the expectations there. Not to kind of like put a button on on this at all, but I think it's really important for us to go dreamy, be generative, and really just like think about this problem and problem space in all the different ways that we can. Yeah, so that's usually what we start with. That usually helps us.
Well, it's working for sure. Absolutely. Well, listen, Damien, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. It's been an illuminating session, and I'm so glad
Thank you for having me
to wrap up BYOB for 2023. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next year.
Cool.